Summer is here, even if it seems like the kids have been out of school for months already. And sometimes when you run out of things to do on those long, hot summer days, you might think, we should watch a movie. You know, one of those big summer blockbusters, the kind that puts a smile on all of our faces. Hey everyone, Adam Holz here, your host of the Plugged In Show, focused on the family's weekly conversation about entertainment, pop culture, and technology. We're glad you have joined us today. And if you're thinking, it seems like this summer is a bit short on big budget blockbusters, well, as my 16-year-old would say, you're not wrong. Last year's strike in Hollywood is really just now being felt in earnest, and the theatrical offerings are indeed a bit slim this year, though of course we are still covering everything that's out there in theaters week in and week out at Plugged In. So a few weeks ago, Paul Asay tackled this issue in his blog, 10 of the best summertime blockbusters from the last 10 years, which you'll find in the episode notes for today's show. And even though Paul is not with us today, well, he's still alive. He's not dead. He's just not on the podcast. We thought his idea would be a great one to talk about. What are some of the best big budget tentpole movies from the summers of yesteryear that we could talk about and unpack on the show? And instead of just marching right down Paul's most excellent list, we thought it'd be fun to have each person participating today share a favorite summer movie from years gone by and why. And we'll also dive a bit deeper, talking about what makes a great summer movie and why we love to lose ourselves in these bigger-than-life stories. And in our second segment, it's time to talk about Billie Eilish once again. She's got a new album out called Hit Me Hard and Soft. And if that seems like a title with a lot of layers to it, well, it is. And we'll talk about it in more detail on our second segment today. Well, before we dive into those two conversations, let me once more commend to your attention our new Plugged In book. It's called Becoming a Screen Savvy Family. We think it's practical and concrete. It's theological. It's intellectual. It's a little bit of everything. And what we're aiming to do is helping you and your family have all of the tools you need to navigate this crazy world of both popular culture and technology. And today, for a gift of any amount, we would love to send you a copy, and you'll find information on how to do that in the episode notes for today's show. Okay, with no further ado, let's get started. Joining me today are Emily Chow, Bob Hoos, and Jonathan McKee. Hey, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Adam.
Hey.
Well, we're going to talk about summertime movies today, but I would love to hear from you a favorite summer memory from when you were growing up that's not related to movies. So there's lots of space to explore there.
Yeah.
Bob, you're nodding and smiling, so I pick you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when I was a kid, back in the Stone Age,
Right.
what
was it like to ride a dinosaur to school?
That's right.
Both ways uphill.
But in the summer we were off school, so we would bang rocks. No, we didn't have anything. We didn't have anything like today's tech or anything like that to deal with. We just had each other, and I have
sticks.
actually.
You had
yeah,
sticks.
right. Well, in a way, that's my answer, because see, I lived in a trailer park. My family was rather poor, and but the great thing about living in a trailer park was there were tons of kids.
Yeah.
And so we all got together and we played baseball.
Aww.
And that was our summer routine. Where
You were the Sandlot.
I was thinking
exactly
that. You lived the Sandlot.
In fact, we built our own little Sandlot diamond, and we just did that. You know, I'd jump on my bike each morning, grab my glove, and ride over to the Sandlot, and we'd play ball, and it was great fun. I look back upon it now. I think, yeah, okay, kids these days have got everything at their fingertips.
Yeah.
But there was something special about just getting together and playing ball.
Yeah.
I just gotta say, you just fulfilled so many warm, happy feelings for me, about the world. So,
Yeah.
yay! I
was
love
fun.
that.
Emily, what about you?
My family used to like going camping. We'd usually go once or twice each summer. We lived near a campground, and my dad literally had everything you could want for basic camping needs. He was military, so he just he knew everything that we could possibly need. So he would always create. It became lovingly known as Tarp City.
Nice.
Because inevitably it always rained at least 2 or 3 days the week we were there, and rather than let our entire campsite get destroyed, he would put up Tarp City, and people would come by and they'd be like, you'd make friends at these campgrounds,
Right. It's kind of like a trailer park, really.
Yeah.
And what would end up happening though is they'd be like, okay, so where's your tent? And be like, Tarp City, and they were like, what? And like, you'll know it when you see it. And sure enough, like, we never had trouble. Like, people would drive by and they'd be like, oh, yep, that's Tarp City.
That's Tarp City.
So, yeah.
That's an awesome memory. Jonathan, what about you?
Yeah, the summer for me was a lot about riding bikes with my friends, right? I like how Bob described everybody, all the kids hung out. It's funny, I kind of have two memories because I was actually... yesterday, talking with my wife, we were talking about my grandson. Man, he's going to have to learn to ride his bike soon. Where's he going to learn to ride his bike? And it brought us back to when we learned how to ride bikes. And I told her, I actually learned how to ride my bike at Denver Seminary when I was 4 years old. My dad was a student there. And it was really cool because we lived in the apartments, and the apartments surrounded like this huge sidewalk area. And all the kids of all the seminary students would go down there and ride their big wheels around. And we eventually graduated to riding bikes. And I remember my dad taking me along and teaching me. And I told her, I said, I never had training wheels because we were always big wheeling, which you're pumping big wheel and you really learn to pedal. By the time I got to a bike, it was just like, keep pedaling and kind of make sure you don't tip over left or right, and that was it. And so I have really fun memories of riding my bike around with all my little friends, and that graduated to even when we moved to Sacramento area. Summer was all about, it's kind of like a scene straight out of Stranger Things where everybody's on a little bike, they're all going around. And that's what it was like. And it was just so fun to explore and do things because we didn't have devices in our pockets. It was awesome.
Love it. I could tell a story exactly like that, but it would be boring to tell the same story. I was even going to use the Stranger Things comparison, Jonathan, but you beat me to it, so I can't even go there.
It's funny.
So I'm going to talk about the time when I flew a plane when I was 14, which is the only time I have ever piloted a plane.
Wow.
Whatever your experience is as a kid, whether it was rich or poor, when you're a kid, it's just normal, right? It's just what your family does. And my grandfather, shortly before I was born, started going to Canada every summer. I grew up in Iowa, and he would go to Canada for a week and take whoever wanted to go with him from the family fishing. And so I went to Canada for the first time, I think the summer that I turned 6. And we went every summer to go fishing, and we went way, way up north in Ontario. And again, it's just like, well, this is just what your family does. And one year we flew into a lake that you couldn't get to. You couldn't drive to it. So you had to take a floater plane in.
Oh,
and,
wow.
And so
that's awesome.
It was awesome. And I got to sit in the co-pilot seat, and we got up in the air, and I was 14. And the pilot who was taking us in said, okay, I have to make a couple of notations in my log. He said, you see that tower over there? Just aim toward that. If you go right, the plane goes right. If you go left, the plane goes left. And he said, your feet are on these pedals or the yoke. He gave me some basic instructions, but it turned out that actually just flying straight toward one object on the horizon was virtually impossible.
Because you were 14 and you didn't want to fly straight down the horizon.
No, I was actually trying, but it's sort of like when you lose control of a car and you overcorrect the other way and you fishtail more and more.
Yeah.
So, I'm going up and down and sideways, and finally he looks at me, he's like, you better let me drive, you're making everybody sick. But I did actually get to pilot the plane when I was 14, probably for about 10 seconds. It wasn't very long, but it was long enough to,
that's exciting.
To have
exciting
fun.
stuff.
And we landed on the lake, and it was the best,
my goodness.
And I think that it's those sorts of memories that make summers, such a nostalgic thing when we think about our childhoods.
Yeah.
But I also think that a lot of our memories may even revolve around movies we went to. And so, as I mentioned in the intro today, I wanted to just talk about what are some of our favorite summer blockbusters from yesteryear. And Paul identified 10 movies from the last 10 summers. We don't have to be quite that tight with our timeline. We can go back further than that if we want to. But before we dive into some of our personal reflections on favorite summer blockbusters, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the whole phenomena, the idea of the summer movie, the great summer blockbuster. So, pair of related questions to get us going. What makes a movie a great summer blockbuster, and what does it take for a movie to stand the test of time year in and year out? I guess it's kind of the same question, two different ways.
I think things used to be different. And Adam, you and I were born the same year. That's why our stories are probably all the same. Because
that's right. You're my brother from another mother, Jonathan.
Exactly, man. We lived in that exact same time period. In the time period we lived in, there was 3, maybe 4 TV channels. You had to go to bed at a certain time on a school night. You didn't have a screen in your back pocket. Yeah. And so summer also was this time where we can go to a movie on Wednesday night. We can go to the drive-ins where you stuck that little thing hanging in your window and hope it didn't break the glass. You
should explain what a drive-in is to the children who have never seen one.
Exactly. And the whole concept of if you had no integrity, sneaking people in the trunk and the drive. Anyway, but we're not going there at all.
No.
But although my wife will tell stories about how her mom would tuck 2 of them in the trunk every time they went to the drive. Anyway, but
But that's the Cheap those Families podcast, right? It's a different podcast.
Absolutely. But it was like a different time period. So movies were a huge part of entertainment. It was also a huge part of something either families or friends did together. You could do it, and you weren't limited by, hey, it's a school night, because pretty much during the year, at least my family, you'd only go to a movie on a Friday night. Yep. We wouldn't even go on a Saturday night because you had church the next day.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Friday night was the only time for movies. During summer, man, it was all open. You could go see Batman. I saw it on opening night.
You could go to church, and then you could go see a movie.
Yeah, on Wednesday night. Yeah. You wouldn't go either Wednesday night either because it was church. But Thursday or Tuesday, you could
Thursday
go.
Or Tuesday.
So I think that was a huge part of it, and maybe that momentum has carried a little bit, but it was definitely different back then. Movies were like a very big part of our entertainment culture because you couldn't stream Stranger Things.
I think that's still why we think in terms of summer blockbusters, because as Jonathan was saying, that's when all the kids are off, and that's when the theaters, the movie makers, Hollywood is releasing all these big hits because they think, okay, there's going to be a rich audience out there. I think that's where the whole concept came from, the idea that you've got this audience, they want something fun, let's give them the great stuff now, And so a lot of these summer blockbusters were oftentimes like these big action films, big budget films. We still see that. Well, we're sort of past the Marvel era, into the next generation now. But when Marvel was pumping out movies every
year,
well, every month it seemed. Yeah. But they were always aiming with these big budget productions and these big splashy things, and crowds were swarming in. I think another thing that makes a big budget movie like that popular and is just recognizable cast, people that you connect with and say, oh, I like that star, and you go see that. And so a lot of times the blockbusters will have the Tom Cruise or somebody like that in there.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Tom Cruise specifically, because I was looking at, summer blockbusters from the 90s and the 2000s, and what do you see? You see Mission Impossible, you see Top Gun Maverick. Well, that was those are the 2020s, but it's kind of funny because when I think about what's come out like the last few summers, they're all remakes or continuations of things from 20, 30 years ago. So it's like the next Mission Impossible, it's the next Top Gun, it's the next,
Raiders.
Yes, Raiders. It's all these movies that came out in the past, but it's just a continuation. And I think that there's been a drop off though, because it's almost like they don't remember how to make a summer blockbuster nowadays. It's like, because I look at all those titles from the past and I'm like, yep, saw that. And I'm looking at the list of the movies coming out this year and I'm like, you know what? Unless Plugged In's paying me to go see these, I'm probably not going to see them because none of them are catching my interest the way these old movies used to.
I think Hollywood is very risk averse these days because it's so expensive.
Right.
And so, they're only making things that they think they've got a built-in audience for automatically. You don't see as many original, fresh ideas.
But I think there's a problem with that even though, because they're drawing these stories out to the point where it's like, they're still sitting there squeezing the cloth, hoping that something will come out. And what we're getting are these, like kind of pathetic movies where it's like, oh, this is ruining this series for me, you know?
Well, I think that was especially the case with the latest Raiders of the Lost Ark movie.
Yeah.
Indiana Jones. For those
Indiana
of us
Jones,
who
right? It's always Raiders to me.
Yeah, exactly.
To be fair, they renamed it after the fact, kind of like Star Wars.
No, Star Wars is Star Wars. It's not A New Hope. That's not the title of the movie.
Calm down.
I think that interestingly, we're even talking about that period of time and there's a nostalgia for it. It's in some ways we want to recapture that magic from yesteryear. And I think the irony is, Star Wars was done. I had to talk about Star Wars. Star Wars was done on a $10 million budget. I mean, think about that. What George Lucas accomplished in 1977 and 78, with essentially nothing. And now we have the technical ability to do everything, and you get these huge bombastic stories. But I think what you're getting at, Emily, is that the heart kind of gets lost sometimes.
Well, and that is the thing. A blockbuster, a true blockbuster, the one that sticks with you, is a great story, and it's generally escapist fun.
Yeah.
It's something that takes you out of the mundane and puts you into something special.
Yep. And I want to riff on that with one question, and then I want to get to our picks. You used the word escapist, and I think that there is something about escapism. We want a little break from reality. We want to walk in from a hot summer day and go into a cool, dark theater, and, depending on your parents' budget, maybe you get some popcorn, maybe you get a 72-ounce drink,
and share it.
and share it, right?
Of course.
There's something special about being ushered into that. As Christians, to what extent do you think escapism is something that we can really accept thankfully and with open arms and hands? And is there a point at which escapism is not a good thing from a spiritual point of view? Any thoughts on that, Emily?
I have actually given this question a lot of thought.
Good.
And because I am somebody who struggles with escapism in that, if I had my druthers, I'd probably always be escaping, and and that's unhealthy. And so what I've come to realize that escapism is safe and it's totally normal and fine if you're using it to decompress, to if you're feeling a little stressed and you just want to get away and you want to watch somebody else's life for a minute, or you want to, escape to Middle Earth for a few hours. Like, that's okay. That's normal. That's even healthy in some cases. And then there's, I need to get away from my life because of insert reason, and you're using it in place of your life. Like, you're getting to the point where you're like, I wish this was my life. That's when it starts becoming a spiritual problem, because, you're basically dreaming of a world that doesn't exist, that God didn't create. And it's like, we are created to go unfortunately, the way we were created is we do have to deal with stress and stuff because, we are sinful natures. And so, you can sit there and you can be like, well, I just want to escape because life is just too stressful right now. And that's fine for like an hour or two. But when you start doing it constantly, when you're always wanting to escape, that's no longer you just wanting to decompress. That is you wanting to escape your life and essentially, in a way, escape God, in my opinion. That's the way I have perceived it. And I've struggled with this, so I've tried to find a way around that.
I think it's interesting how trials or even tragedy in your life can sometimes be almost a litmus test or of really where do you go? What's at your core? What foundation do you have to stand on when all the, everything else around you is shaky ground? And 2020 was one of those years for me. Our listeners know that I've shared that on this podcast, but it was a time where I was like, I was really searching what is there to stand on during tough times. And I remember a specific memory during that time where, been crying a lot that day, really wanted to escape. And I remember going to my go-to, and I went to like Netflix to watch some show or something like that. And in all honesty, it didn't work. It just didn't. My mind was still going. I was kind of wrought with pain and whatever. And I literally turned it off, and I went back to this chair that I went to that I was reading through the Psalms, and I opened the Psalms, and it filled me. It filled my soul because it was something that was very real. And I use that only as an example, and not to in any way say, oh, look at me, how spiritual I was. Actually, to the contrary, how come that didn't happen all the time? How come it took tragedy, to do that? But it literally made me realize that, it is fun when you're just sitting and you're tired at the end of the day. My wife and I, we throw on BritBox and it's fun. We watch it and we have to throw on the subtitles because we don't understand the accents. And, there's that normal kind of escape that happens. But when it really comes down to it, what do you stand on? What is your foundation?
Yeah.
And that's where, for me, my relationship with God is what carried me through those tough times, and Netflix didn't work.
Well, and that's kind of what I was getting at too, is that, are you seeking the movie to relieve your stress, or are you seeking the movie to have a little bit of fun?
Yeah.
Because it does matter where you look for relief, and we should turn to God.
Yeah. In a general sense, I don't think there's anything wrong with movies. Movies, when you boil them down, are essentially good stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've been sharing stories amongst us as mankind forever.
Right. And since before you were born.
That's right. and to good
that was
ends,
a long time ago.
That's right. And when you look at the Bible, it's packed with stories.
Yeah.
And those
Absolutely.
stories are used to help us connect and understand certain feelings, emotions, thought processes. And so, I think movies can be very much that kind of story that moves you to an idea or a thought. I think there are a lot of mediocre films, too, that are bad stories that just want to pound some sort of preachy idea at you. But when they raise good questions, I think they can be very helpful.
Isn't it funny that when you put your kid to bed, or for me, when I put my grandkid to bed, tell me a story.
Yeah.
It's like the last thing before. Literally, it's story, pray, eyes closed. It's just funny.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to work. For me, it was story, pray, Dad, can you get me some water? Can you tell me another story?
Oh, he tries that.
Anyway.
He tries
that.
Yeah.
Well,
but one more little thing about story. Think about how many times around the family table, the little kids say, can you tell me something that happened to you, a story in your life? Why? Because it connects them with who you used to be and who you are.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about some. Enough, preamble. That was actually, just the setup for the conversation. But what are some of your, we'll start with one. What's one of your favorite summer blockbusters from yesteryear, and why? Why do you think it connects with you?
Wall-E.
Wall-E.
Yeah. A story about a little robot connects with me. No, I think I love that movie because for so many reasons. One of the reasons is just that it's actually not even really dialogue heavy. It's all you're just watching this little robot make his way through the world and develop these emotions. And, we could get into just how stinking cute Wall-E is. I mean, seriously.
And his little robot girlfriend, Eva.
But Wall-E's cuter. But you watch that story and it's just so sweet and heartwarming and simple. And like when you watch that movie, like, yes, it has like some fun little messages, and I say fun, they're not really fun, but it does have some messages in there, about our dependence on technology. And, there's the whole thing about how like they basically trashed the world. But, so it does make you think to a certain degree. But for the most part, you can just enjoy this nice little story about this little robot and how he just wants to be with his friend Eva, his little girlfriend, and he just falls in love, and it's just cute. And that was one of my favorite ones growing up because I mean, all the reasons I already listed.
Mainly pantomime almost in terms of what you've
I've heard it compared to a Charlie Chaplin movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it basically is almost the equivalent of a silent movie.
Yeah. It's a good one. I've got a couple on my list, or several, I should say. But I think most of the ones when I think of a great blockbuster from the past or a blockbuster, it's older films. I tend to hearken back to older films. And one of the newer ones is Iron Giant. And we've talked about that, I think, on this podcast before. A story of this robot that's actually actually a weapon that crashes down to Earth. But when he crashes to Earth, he gets a thunk in his head and he loses his memory. And then he meets this young boy who actually helps him learn how to be a hero. And it is such a sweet and entertaining film. It really is a great family film. The only drawback is there's a little bit of mild language in there for little kids that might sort of keep them on the outside edge.
Well, and that's a great point here. In talking about some of our favorites, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily
problem-free,
completely free from problems. And so, as always, check pluggedin.com before you watch anything.
Well, I mean, another one on my list was Goldfinger.
Oh, yeah.
From 1964.
Which we haven't reviewed, I don't think.
No, we have not. But it's, it's like the third Bond film in the series with Sean Connery, and it's over the top bombastic, and it's kind of broad and fun compared to like the modern Bonds.
Yeah.
It's but the real drawback with that one is, and by the way, story-wise, it's about Bond being assigned to investigate this gold smuggler, and then he finds out that the guy has plans to raid Fort Knox. And it's really broad, and he's got this Korean manservant with a steel-rimmed hat. And
Top hat.
It's all just really fun in a way. But the drawback with that,
as long as you're not on the receiving end of the hat,
of the steel-rimmed hat,
right.
The drawback from that is primarily, some sensual things, because Bond of that age,
he's a ladies' man.
That's right.
Bond.
And there's this one scene where one of his girlfriends is laying on a bed painted gold. I mean, but
she's dead.
Yeah.
We should just say that too. I mean, like there's some mild violence, or maybe not mild, but
it wasn't mild
there
for
is
her.
Some violence. I was going to say it was not mild for her.
But when you compare those kinds of films from 1960s to some of the more modern things, boy, there's a lot less than you may anticipate.
Yeah,
it's more suggestion in movies from that era than it is actually seeing it on screen.
Yeah.
Jonathan, what do you have for us?
No, good stuff. Yeah, another summer. It's funny how, by the way, most of these, when you actually look up the release dates, I mean, we all know, as a matter of fact, pop quiz, Adam, when was Star Wars released? What day of the year?
May 25th, 1977.
Yeah, May 25th.
You're going to have to try harder than that.
Raiders?
Raiders was probably the same day in 1981.
It was June 12th.
Okay, well, there you go.
So Top Gun, May 12th. So on June 10th of years to follow, it was actually 2011. I'm going to go with J.J. Abrams' Super 8. And I'm going to go there because we've been talking about Stranger Things. You want to know before Stranger Things about kids on bikes on adventure, great adventure film. I mean, I think it's PG-13, definitely some content issues. But man, I tell you, if you got young teenagers and they like Stranger Things, take them back to Super 8. Fun summer
and
film.
Some violence and some scary stuff, but
I mean it's
who's the young actress in that one?
Elle Fanning.
Fanning. That's right. She is
Dakota's sister.
Brilliant in that film. I mean, there's this one moment where there's just this young teen kid, and she does this little little scene that she's acting, and they're filming her, the kids are, and she's just brilliant. I mean, that was the first film I'd ever seen her in, and I thought, wow.
And you'll see a bunch of other people too. I mean, like Kyle Chandler, and then you'll see a bunch of people. You're like, oh, that guy from the. I mean, there's tons of good talent in that movie, and it's J.J. Abrams, man. It's good. So the other one I just got to give a shout out to, since Bob took two, I got to slip another one in.
I've got a third.
And I've mentioned it before. I know. I got a list. I got a top 10 list.
We do have,
time.
A podcast to eventually end. So
that's right. But I've got to mention The Way Back. And it's one that maybe some people haven't seen, but if you've got older teenagers, it's about this teenager for the summer going to the summer house with this single mom who's dating this lame guy, played by Steve Carell. Interesting part for Steve Carell. And it is such an interesting film. It is a tearjerker. It is about friendship. It's about bullying. It's about parenting, and interesting film.
I've never seen that one.
I haven't seen it either.
Does it have any content issues?
Yeah, in a PG-13 type way, language, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it is just if you can make it through without a Kleenex box, and I mean, it was good.
Yeah, and as always, you'll want to check out the full review on everything that we're talking about here. And I think one of the things that we forget with movies that moved us is we can forget some of the stuff that was problematic too, which, I've mentioned that, especially with...
We've done a podcast on that.
Yeah, we've done a whole podcast on that, some of the stuff from the 80s especially. And I know the way back isn't quite that far back, but we can forget what was there. Yeah. So I am going to take us back to the summer of 1982. And even though our producer, Ashley, will not be joining us today... Oh, sorry, Ashley. I think she will like my choice. The summer of 1982 saw the second Star Trek movie, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, with Ricardo Montalban.
Yes.
So I thought you were going to say E.T., because that also came out in 1982.
Yeah, and I actually thought about E.T., which I saw recently and really holds up. And
I love that movie.
And it might be... the primo kids bicycling movie. But Wrath of Khan is everything that you loved about the 60s show. Yeah. The funny thing is when you watch it now, it's a little bit on the slow side. It's sort of right at, I think, this inflection point in our culture when we had to have these enormous set piece to set piece to set piece kind of things. But I love Kirk, and it's about the no-win situation. Yeah. And what do we do when we're in a place where no matter what we do, there's no way out?
Which Captain Kirk was famous for.
And he rejects the entire paradigm.
That's right. Yep.
And Ricardo Montalban is one of the all-time great villains. And, for those of us who grew up watching Fantasy Island, we were having a hard time even understanding how can Mr. Rourke be the bad guy here? But man... He pulls it off. Yeah. Well, I suspect there's a zillion other movies we could talk about here.
Oh, wait. Don't sign off yet. Don't sign off. Because there's one more that I won't even talk about it. I won't even
You're going to talk about it, though.
I won't even I just threw out the title. You got to watch Yankee Doodle Dandy. Okay. It's a 1942 James Cagney film, musical. George M. Cohan.
I've always wanted to see it, and I haven't, but because of your suggestion, I'll go home and watch it.
Go watch that one.
All right. And on that note...
And The Sandlot.
You guys...
We're just going to keep naming
just keep throwing them out.
You're making it really hard for me to stick the landing here. I hope that as we have talked about these movies today, maybe there are some that you haven't thought about. Maybe it's something worth considering. And I hope that it's caused you to think about how and why movies move us so emotionally. And maybe you pick one of these, maybe you pick one from Paul's list. Have a movie night with your family. Yeah. Turn all your phones off, enjoy a good movie, and laugh and cry, and then talk about it afterwards. Because I think the joy of these movies is they really can be something that we share together as a family, as opposed to just, all being locked down on our own screens individually. So, maybe even just go back to your Blu-ray or your DVD collection and plug your old player in that you haven't used, since you started streaming stuff, and pick a favorite and go for it. Well, thanks, guys, for this conversation today.
You bet.
Well, as I mentioned in the introduction, Billie Eilish has a new album out. It is called Hit Me Hard and Soft. And I had a chance to review it, and my compatriot Paul had a chance to edit it. So we both spent some time thinking about it. Paul, do you want to ask me about the album?
Adam, I would love to ask you about the album.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's Billie Eilish is a really, really fascinating character.
She's really fascinating.
She has very smart lyrics. She definitely goes to the beat of her own drummer, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it seems like this album is an illustration of that, right? So what are we dealing with here with this album?
Well, we're actually dealing with an album. For starters.
Whole album, yeah.
Well, no, what I mean is back in the day, when you and I were growing up, an album was 10 songs, and it was about 40 to 45 minutes. It wasn't 31 songs.
31 songs.
Taylor Swift. It was 10. So I actually was relieved that it was only 10 songs.
Does
for
it
starters.
feel sometimes like Taylor Swift is just breaking the curve for everybody? Would she be one of those kids who would sit up in the front of the class?
Would you want to be in class with Taylor Swift?
Goodness.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
But it speaks to, Taylor Swift's popularity that we're not even talking about her today. We're talking about Billie Eilish. Now, I actually do want to use that as a real segue and not just a comedy point. Obviously, Taylor is the biggest thing in the universe, but Billie Eilish is sort of like the anti-Taylor, right? Mm-hmm. Biggest thing in the universe, music-wise.
Yeah, exactly.
To those listening at home, Paul made a face when I said that because he knew that I was saying something accidentally blasphemous, which was not my intent.
Got to keep you on point.
Got to keep me on point. So, if Taylor Swift is the girl next door, what my daughters would say, she's a pick-me, right? She sits in front and raises her hand and says, pick me, pick me.
Yeah.
Billie Eilish is the goth kid, wearing a jumpsuit in the back of the room. Like, she's image-wise, she has built her career on being the anti-Taylor Swift.
She kind of has, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The interesting thing is I reviewed these albums back to back within a couple of weeks of each other, and they're thematically very similar. And that this is a reflection on love and loss and lust pretty much in equal measure. And I think certainly she brings the Billie Eilish flair and subtlety to things in a way that's totally different than Taylor.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to me that they ended up kind of in the same place thematically.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about sort of these high school metaphors, the kid sitting in the back, the kid sitting in the front. Because
cue up the Breakfast Club references, right?
Well, it really is. It is sort of like that. You go to your 10th year high school reunion and you realize that all the people who you didn't hang out with actually had all the same worries and concerns.
Right,
and all
because
that kind of
now
stuff.
we're all bald and fat or just
No, I don't think
like
that's true. Again, that is wrong. But
Adam's size, crestfallen.
But it really is interesting when you're talking about those themes that Billie is exploring within this album. Now, it seems like she has always been a thoughtful songwriter.
Yeah.
Would that be fair to say that is part and parcel of this album as well?
I think so. And I think what is different is that especially with her first album and somewhat with her second album, she had this sort of sarcastic, cynical armor to her. And this one felt earnest to the point of, oh, Billie, the dad in me wants to put an arm around you and say, maybe you're oversharing a little bit.
Interesting.
Like, there are points that are just that earnest, poignant, almost fragility that made me protective of her.
That's interesting.
There are other points that were different than that. She came out as gay a while back, I think about a year ago.
2023.
Yeah, and this is a very self-consciously same-gender romance and sexuality kind of album. So we don't have a lot of ambiguous pronouns where people are like, what's she really saying? She likes girls and she sings about it.
Yeah, that is interesting. And you were mentioning earlier on that this is about love and lust and sex, right?
Yes.
So I would imagine that some of these lyrics get pretty graphic. Would that be fair to say?
Man, there is one song in particular called Lunch that my eyebrows were all the way at the top of my forehead for
Which is significant.
The fact that they were up or my forehead?
That your forehead, yeah.
I have a significant forehead, everyone. No, I'm just like, wow, this is really graphic. Then I, looked up to see what other people were saying about it. I'm like, yep, it's about what I thought it was about. And so that song in particular, which is getting a lot of airplay and attention, is almost, I'll use the word ribald. It's a Shakespearean kind of word. It's like, oh, this is a naughty song. And then there are a couple of others that have moments. And then there are some that are just pretty much straight up love songs or breakup songs that you wouldn't necessarily know that it's about a same gender relationship from those lyrics, but certainly in the context of the album as a whole, there's not any ambiguity there. And one of the other things that I wrote in the review is I can't imagine any pop star at her level making this album even 5 years ago. I mean, it just feels like we're at this cultural moment where this is totally accepted and nobody even bats an eye at it. Yeah. And I think that's the world our kids are growing up in. And so as we have talked about with Taylor, it absolutely is critical for us as parents to be engaged in this ongoing conversation about sexuality, because we have people like Billie Eilish who are continuing to normalize same-gender attraction.
Well, I do think that it reminds us that as parents, we don't have the luxury, I think, of timing these conversations because the culture is forcing those conversations.
That's right. And if you happen to miss the fact that she had come out, I mean, that may be news to some of you. Man, you certainly want to know about that in relationship to this album in particular. I don't think that she has Swifties. I'm not sure what Billie Eilish fans are called, but man, eyelashes. No,
we'll move on.
You can't even look at me.
No.
She sold a lot of albums this week, more than 300,000, which is huge these days. So there are a lot of people and a lot of young fans who are going to be influenced by her worldview. And so she may not quite be on Taylor Swift's level, but at least this week, she's not far off from that. And we need to be aware of that as parents.
Absolutely. Let me ask you one more question. Any profanity that we need to worry about?
Yeah, just one. There's one S word, and that was it, which in a very strange way was kind of refreshing after Taylor Swift's album, which is full of profanity. So
irony.
The irony. Yeah. I mean, she doesn't seem to feel the compulsion to push the boundaries and push the envelope like Taylor does.
Well, I think that Billie Eilish, for all of her weaknesses, for all of the issues that come with her music, she has always been very honest.
Yeah,
right?
This is a very honest album. It's a very complex album. And there were songs and lyrics that I really liked. But again, I think if you have a young fan, you definitely want to be aware of where she's coming from. And of course, as always, you can find the full review at pluggedin.com, and you can find a link to this review in the episode notes for today's show.
You did that like a pro. Thank you very much, Adam.
You bet. Thanks, Paul. Well, now we're going to play a little game, and we call it, dad jokes.
Plugged in dad jokes.
And Mr. Hoos, I think this was your brainstorm.
Your creation.
So I'm going to...
Because I'm
going to
let him take the helm. Of all dad jokes.
Of all dadness, right? I'm going to toss it over to you. Why don't you get us started?
Okay. All right. I've got a couple, but I'll just do one.
That seems to be what you're doing today.
Rein myself in. Okay. Cinderella, way back when, was a blockbuster for Disney. But I heard a story that during the filming, Grumpy the dwarf was pickpocketed. And personally, I can't understand how anyone could stoop so low.
Oh, man, all Peter Dinklage is like, he's going to come and tackle you right now. Yeah. He would not appreciate that joke.
But it's a dad joke. Come on.
Man.
Peter Dinklage, if you are listening today, we want to hear from you.
I know, right? Let's be honest.
All right. Emily, what do you have for us?
All right. This one, Paul's not in here today, but I know he would love this. All right. I once submitted 10 puns to a joke competition. I really thought that with that many, one was sure to be a winner. Sadly, no pun intended.
Oh my gosh, that's good. That's good.
Paul would love that.
No pun
You should tell him later.
I will. I'll email it to him.
I like it. Jonathan?
Yeah. I bought the world's worst thesaurus yesterday. Not only was it terrible, it was terrible.
I like that one.
Sorry.
Oh, wow. That's good. That's good.
It took a while, didn't it? It took a while to settle in.
No, I got it right away.
Got it right away.
I got it.
It's the pity chuckle. That's what takes a minute for
my youngest daughter, who's 13, she loves to look up dad jokes, and this is one of our recent favorites in our family, and I will try to do it without botching it. Let me just make sure I have it right in my head. What has 5 toes but isn't your foot?
Your other foot?
My foot. I know. It's so good.
Is it your foot?
I know.
So
But is it your
dumb.
foot?
It's not
My
your
foot.
foot. It's my foot.
Okay.
Get it?
Yeah, that's good.
I
like it.
We like it. My youngest daughter and I, even though I struggle to tell jokes, she thinks it's the best joke ever. So, well,
So have you
good.
asked everyone in our audience to send in their great dad jokes?
no, but why don't you go ahead and do that, Bob?
Hey,
It'll be
why
like
don't-
what you
why
just
don't
said.
You just send in your great dad jokes. We'd love to see them.
We would love to see them, and we would love to share some in an upcoming podcast.
Yes, we would.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Bob, you are quick on your feet and on my feet too.
All 5 toes of them.
All 5 toes of
That's
them.
right.
Well, I hope that you've enjoyed our conversation today. I hope that my dialogue with Paul about Billie Eilish's latest album has given you some things to think about, especially if you have tweens or teens who are fans of her music. And as always, we hope that the Plugged In Show has equipped and challenged you in some way to think about your entertainment and technology choices in your family. So, does your family have a go-to summer movie? We want to hear about what it is, and you can also toss your dad jokes in at the end.
That's right.
And here's how you can let us know. You can go to thepluggedinshow.com and leave us a voicemail with your answers to those questions, and we might just include it on a future show, or just reach out to us at team@thepluggedinshow.com. And of course, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. We'd also like to remind you that Plugged In is a part of Focus on the Family, and we are a donor-supported ministry. If you have enjoyed or been encouraged by our conversation today, we would invite you to help us keep bringing you the Plugged In Show by making a donation, and you can learn more about how to do that in the episode notes for today's show. Well, thanks again for spending some time with us at the Plugged In Show, and we hope that you have enjoyed what we've had to say today. We know you have lots of ways that you can spend your time, and we look forward to another conversation with you next week on the Plugged In Show.
It's time to level up. Give your kids a safe, faith-focused, and biblically based community, and so much more. Join the Adventures in Odyssey Club. Club members get on-demand access to the exciting Adventures in Odyssey series, including more than 900 episodes. With faith-building activities, parental controls, and a safe online community, the Adventures in Odyssey Club could be your best adventure yet. Learn more and start your free trial at adventuresinodyssey.com/radio.